Hello, I'm Monica White,
And I'm Gitta Morris.
and our maiden name was Bayer. Unfortunately, not like Bayer Aspirin family.
Yes,
So,
not connected.
but it's spelled the same, Bayer, a very German name. We were born in Shanghai, China, in the Jewish ghetto. And we were born on December 9th, 1939.
Some of you have never heard of this.
That year. Yeah. So our story is a little bit unusual. It's not the story of what happened in Europe. Of course, it's related, but our story is in Shanghai, which is a place that many people have never heard that there were any refugees there. Mm-hmm. The other thing about our story is we were born there. So much of what we tell, much of our story is from the perspective of a child, of children. We were children when we were there. There are many things that we remember. Actually, we've been told quite remarkable how much we remember. But we do fill in from things we have learned as adults. We read, we talk to other Holocaust survivors, we've watched, many videos and listened to other storytellers, and we filled in things that we would have had no way of knowing or even understanding as a child. So it's a combination. Of things, and we like to finish up our story with kind of what happened to us after Shanghai, kind of round out a bit about where our lives have gone since.
Mm-hmm. So we are going to start off talking a little bit about our parents. Our dad, Eric Bayer, was born in 1900 in a little town north of Berlin called Mecklenburg. And he was born in 1900. Can you imagine what he saw in his lifetime? The good thing about his being born that year is we always knew how old he was, right?
Same as the year.
Made it easy. Our mother was born in Poland, in a town called Częstochowa, in 1913. Her father was what they call a political dissident. He would stand on the street corner and rave and rant about the government and all that stuff and make a lot of trouble. Okay. Eventually, they literally threw him out of the country, out of Poland, and he made his way to Berlin. And some years later, our mother and her siblings, and of course their mother, also went to Berlin. She was quite young, maybe 3 or 4. We don't really know. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this was Berlin in 1938. This is what Berlin looked like. They met and married there. Now, it was a very perilous time already for Jewish people, because many people do not realize that Hitler started building concentration camps in 1933. There were already 5 concentration camps completely done. And he started picking up people who were identified as Jews off the street. All somebody had to say is that guy's a Jew or whatever, and they disappeared. And that's what happened to our dad. He really wasn't anybody. In particular, he wasn't a politician, he wasn't a professor, he wasn't a scientist, and yet someone identified him as being Jewish and he disappeared. And that's what happened to people. Now,
during those years, it was possible for the families of the person that was picked up to attempt to locate their family member. You could go from camp to camp and find out if their person was there. And that's what their parents did. They got together and they went from camp to camp and eventually found him in Buchenwald. Okay, that was the camp where he was. And they were able to
Get him out.
get him out because they did meet certain criteria.
And the criteria for getting someone out of any of those camps was, at that time, remember this is before the war was official, was that you had to show passage out of Germany. Hitler at that time just wanted the Jews gone from Germany, and so you had to prove that you could go somewhere else. We think, we don't know this, we've never read this, but we're sure of it that there was probably some money involved in that exchange. But they did get him out, and he was there under a year, but close to a year at Buchenwald before he was actually found. Now that year, that was the year. 1938.
That the entire world closed their doors to the Jews. They would send whole shiploads of people
away,
including the United States. Okay, they wanted nothing to do with what might involve them with this situation. But there was one city that said, "You're welcome to come," and that was Shanghai, China.
And there was a reason for that. Shanghai has always been a very metropolitan, cosmopolitan city with almost all the large Western countries and Asian countries have businesses there. And they, as a business community, agreed anybody could come. Come, buy, sell, whatever. So Shanghai had an open port.
No papers were necessary.
No papers. You didn't have to prove anything.
Visas, so
anybody could come, and that's what people did that year. And this is what it looked like when our parents, who left in late 1938, arrived in Shanghai, and there it is. So now, if you can see a kind of an archway right there, this street
toward the right.
Can you
right
see it
at
on
the middle?
This was Broadway. It was actually, that's the name of the street. It's called Broadway. Lots of business, as you can see, and it was a very hub of a lot of activity. But once you go through that arch, you are in what became the Jewish ghetto. And it looks very different in there once you go through that.
When you step through the arch, there's a long, like a road, okay, and off that road were little smaller
alleys,
alleys, really, containing two-story buildings all the way far back, and that's how people lived.
Yeah, and when the first Jewish refugees arrived in this area, by the way, it's called Hongkew, Hongkew, which is still an area of Shanghai. When they first arrived, they already found these scenes because the Japanese, allies of Germany, had been there since 1934, and there had been this kind of destruction. Now, not all of Hongkew looked like this, and the place in the area where they settled were buildings, standing up buildings, all in one piece.
And that's where we all lived. Okay. And these are scenes of things we actually remember seeing. People living on the street, eating on the street, dying on the street,
working on the street,
whatever they could do to get by. And then the third picture is of the Yangtze River, which flooded every year and flooded the ghetto. And we have vivid memories of our dad carrying us each on one shoulder to keep us out of the water, which came about to his knees, okay, and going somewhere. We don't know where, but that didn't matter. Yeah, we still remember that.
So the ghetto itself was inhabited in those years by the very lowest income Chinese citizens. That's where they lived. It was already a ghetto of poor Chinese. And they were very kind to the refugees because they said, well, yes, we don't have much, but we have a country and you don't, kind of thing. They were actually very, very kind. So life in the ghetto was difficult. This is really how we lived there. Every people came, and honestly, we don't know how the communication network occurred. I don't know if anything's ever been written about this, but everyone in Europe knew that you could go to Shanghai if you were Jewish, that there were people already there, that there was a place that you could go, and they came. By the time the war started in 1941, there were 20,000 of us in the ghetto. Now we've read 25,000, we've read 18,000, but somewhere in that neighborhood, in that range, that's how many by the time the war became official.
So the living situation was like this. A family or a couple would get a room, and it was one room in this building, and it was like a dollhouse, you know. In this corner was the bedroom, and over here was the kitchen, you know, and so on. And that's how people lived, with a coal stove for cooking, and you always had to boil the water. You could never drink it out of wherever it came from.
Which was a big sink outside in the alley.
Restrooms and bathrooms.
Outdoor plumbing, no indoor
yeah.
plumbing.
And it was particularly difficult for single men. They would just put them together, 8, 10 in a room, and that's how they had to live. You know, there was no one to give us food. Although in recent years we were told there were some soup kitchen provided by people who could do that, but we have no memory of that, so we can't address that.
Yeah, and. Actually, what happened is what happens in many refugee communities before the war, from 1937 till 41, they built a community. They had a theater, they had some shops, there was a cafe, they had a newsletter, a newspaper. You know, they were there. They were stuck. They really had no place to go, and they built a synagogue. And to this day, that synagogue is the only thing remaining of the ghetto. It's now the Shanghai Jewish Museum, but it's that building, you know, renovated building. So, but anyway, that is the community that we were born into, and there we are. Weren't we cute?
What happened to you? Yeah.
Stop it.
We had a chance here.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, we're just showing this as picture.
But we do find that one interesting thing about that, during the years, I would say the 10 years or so that the Jewish people were there,
the refugees were there.
The refugees were there. There were only 2 sets of twins born.
There were 300 births, we've been told, and we met at they used to have a reunion of the Shanghai Jews every 2 years, I think. We went to one, and we met the daughter of the doctor that delivered us, and she had a picture of him with these 2 sets of twins. One of them was us, but of course we couldn't pal.
Mm,
You know, he was holding one set in each arm. You know, it was kind of it was kind of funny.
It was.
Yeah.
The adults, the head of household, however, had to find a way to feed their families while living in the ghetto, and took any kind of job they could get, cleaning, washing, whatever they could find.
Warehouses, working
and
at the
things.
port, and you know, so on and so. Our dad, this is a picture of our dad. At this particular job, he was at a water
A water purification plant.
Yeah, so that was a job he had. One job he had for a little while later on was with CARE, C-A-R-E. You know, you may have heard of CARE packages, and that was fantastic because every now and then he would be able to bring a CARE package, and that's how we first were introduced to powdered milk, which we had never had, and chocolate, which we had never had. You know, that was in those. But to this day, we're obsessed with dairy. We actually like half and half, and whipped cream.
Whipped cream is our favorite.
Stuff like that. But that was a big deal. Then one day we were aware, and as kids we would play outside, that everyone was heading towards Broadway. Everybody was sort of going fast towards the big street. So of course we all had to go too. And what we saw was from curb to curb,
one side of the street to the other, there were soldiers marching with guns, and tanks and trucks were driving down the street, and they came to the ghetto. Okay.
And of course it was the Japanese.
Yes.
The Japanese army or military. And that was when we became interned. It's an interesting story about that. You can read this in the literature of the times. Hitler evidently sent a delegation to Shanghai to speak with the people in the head of the military, the Japanese, their allies, and they basically said, look, we can solve this problem for you really fast about these 20,000 or however many. We can get rid of them real fast. We'll build you a concentration camp. Supposedly what happened was that the Japanese refused.
To their credit.
Okay. And with the support of the Chinese government, United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, the other political bodies, all agreed with the Japanese, and that's why we were interned instead of in a concentration camp in Shanghai. We once heard that the reason the Japanese refused the concentration camp, which was important because we've all heard horrendous stories about what Japanese did to prisoners of war. And that didn't happen in Shanghai. It just did. They left us basically to fend for ourselves, but they were not personally, cruel to us. And the reason, we're told, is because the Japanese thought the Jewish people were the absolute smartest people about money and the best business people in the world. And they respected them. That's what it says. You can actually read that. So that's what we know.
And so they kind of herded
us.
20,000 refugees and put us in a different place in
the ghetto.
In the ghetto still. And it was called an internment camp, and so we always called it camp.
But it wasn't like walled in or anything like. It was just we were squished, 20,000 of us, into some corner of the ghetto.
And consequently, this life of having your own room disappeared, and we were living about 5 families
In one room.
In one of those rooms. And if you were lucky, you had a blanket, maybe a sheet, a piece of
Something.
fabric that you could hang up to separate you from each other.
I would say, would you say the room was about this size?
Yeah.
Maybe a little smaller.
Yeah, it was not a big room.
No.
Very tight. And so people just did the best that they could. We were fortunate, our family, because we got a corner and a window. So we felt fortunate about that. We spent a lot of time sitting on the windowsill, which was rather wide, and just looking out the window, you know. So.
Yeah, just staring out the window. And we did see some things like, so sometimes we would see, looked like, we think there might have been a medical unit over on the left, because we would see some people who looked like they were hurt being carried that way, so we're not sure. Now, this was not a situation where we were bombed every day, and that was also very different from Europe. We did not have that. We did have a lot of sirens. There was a lot of threats, and there were there were some occasions where there was some bombing. But we were taught, as small as we were, as young as we were, if we were there in our building without adults, because they were out trying to work, we would run and open all the windows in case we were bombed. The building wouldn't implode. It would explode, but it wouldn't implode. And then run into the middle of wherever we could gather together and huddle until we heard the all clear. And that's a memory that very clear.
We have yes,
that.
Yes. And people continued to try to leave the grounds to find some work or find some food or whatever. But it turned out that there was a Japanese officer, right? Who was in charge of letting people out who wanted to go and work. But it depended, whether they could or not, depended on what side of the bed he got out of that morning. He was
quite unstable, very moody. There's lots of stories about him. His name is Goya. His last name was Goya. And he's very short, and he had kind of a Napoleonic complex. And he would get up on the table. There was just a table and a chair at the arch where you had to go through to get out of the ghetto, out of the camp. And he'd been known to get up on the table and yell at people and say, "I'm not letting you out today." And it really was totally up to him. There's lots of stories about him. But whatever else was going on, there was a war, there was the internment, there was the uncomfortableness of the living situation. There was not much food. The adults really did their best, but there really wasn't much. We remember being hungry. We were scared. The siren, so we had this kind of fear, hunger situation as very little kids. And then one day, one day, our mother disappeared. Poof.
Just gone, never came back. And we waited and waited for her, and she did not come back to the camp. And our dad, unfortunately, wouldn't tell us anything to this day. He's long dead.
Since to his dying day, he never told us what happened. It was verboten, just forbidden to even speak of her, ask any questions, nothing. And we never really got the full story about that, although over time we heard lots of stories, but we still don't know which one is, what really happened.
That's
we'll
correct.
Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and then another day there was big excitement. August of 1945 because the war had ended. And that day, everyone ran out into the big courtyard and they were singing and laughing and yelling and jumping up and down. Everybody was so happy that the war was over and we could leave this living
the camp.
situation.
Yeah.
The camp.
Back to our one room.
Still in the ghetto, but back to a one-room life. But no matter what was going on, the Jewish community believes in educating their children at all costs, and we always went to school.
Always went to school.
Went to school.
Yeah. And so here we are in kindergarten at the top picture. And since our mother had disappeared, by the way, we were still in camp when she disappeared. We really loved our kindergarten teacher, and we were really hoping that our dad would that they would get married.
Yeah.
But of course, that never happened.
That didn't happen.
That was our fantasy.
And you'll notice that the boys and girls were separated. That's just how it was.
And they, the schools were there because of some very generous Jewish families in Shanghai. Now, Shanghai has had very wealthy export families for years in Shanghai. Many of them Sephardic, many of them from the Middle East and Spain and so forth. And there were a couple of families, the Kaduris, that made their money in opium, which was legal at that time, and they were very, very wealthy. They built a school, and Sassoon hair products, beauty products. They're still around somewhere. They still are in that business, and they were there for many, many years. And they built a school. So there were 2 schools for the refugee kids.
And we went
to Kaduri school. Yeah.
And by the way, and only spoke German.
Yeah, actually, the majority of the refugees in the Shanghai ghetto were German. At least spoke German, and so that's all we know. That's how we grew up. That picture, by the way, that kindergarten picture, is in many museums. We've been in some museums in other places, and that kindergarten picture is. We think, oh look, there we are.
We're on the wall.
We're on the wall. Yeah.
Always shocking.
Although pieces of we've been in other videos. Pieces, bits and pieces. Anyway, they did their best to keep us entertained and to keep us kids, learning and having fun. So, for instance, we had talent shows. What they did, when you're little and you're twins, you're so cute, and people go, do something, get out there, sing, dance, do something, and to entertain other people. And what they did is they taught us songs from other countries and phonetically, and dressed us in their kind of outfits, and that we would perform those songs. This was Anchors Away in English, which is of course a kind of the Navy song, because we had no idea what we were. We literally learned the word. We did Russian, Spanish,
French,
but we never really knew.
Never knew what we were singing about.
And we haven't a clue who these other people are in that picture. So we like to show this picture because this girl in the middle between us and her brother, this is Sonia Muehlberger, who's a very, very important person to the international Jewish community, because she has spent most of her life locating and identifying the refugees that were there. And she alone has identified thousands of them, thousands and thousands of them. She was an educator. She taught school. That's her brother Peter there. And we found each other on the internet probably 15 years, 20 years ago,
something like that.
a while ago, and remained friends and in touch. And her family went back to home. They went to Berlin. Yeah.
The next thing that happened after the war is that organizations such as
United Highest,
those kind
relocation organizations.
came into the ghetto and spoke with the head of household of each family and asked them, where do you want to go? Where do you want to go now? And the whole world was open to them, and they could decide.
Pick. And people went to South America and England, to Australia, to wherever they wanted to.
They wanted to go. Some back.
Some people
back,
like Sonia's family. Yeah, they went back home to Berlin.
To Berlin,
where she lives
she
to
still
this.
lives,
Yeah. Both she and her brother.
Yeah. And our dad thought that coming to the United States was our best opportunity for a future and a decent life. However, we had to wait 3 more years after the war before we were able to leave. So we went to the United States in 1948.
And we were 8 years old.
8 years old then.
Yeah.
And
we just throw this one in because it's our favorite picture of ourselves. As kids.
Yeah.
We've always liked that picture. So we just put it in there. Oh, of course. Gita's over here.
over there. Yeah.
I'm over here, just like we are now.
Do you guys need any water or anything?
Oh yeah. Let's
Right?
Yeah.
take a little sip.
So, all of us who left Shanghai during those years, and people left between probably 46 and through 1950. We've heard that some of the refugees who were there have actually gone back to Shanghai. I don't mean to visit, to live, but I don't know anybody we don't know anybody who's done that, but supposedly everybody was out of the ghetto by 1950. We left in 48. And every one of us carried this document. You can see a lot of it was redacted for some reason or another. And it's an interesting document because it says basically something like the bearer of this document owes his or her allegiance to a government that is now defunct, meaning there was no German government. I should say everyone who was German, because we remember Germany was broken up into 4 parts and there was no German government. So we were, quote, stateless persons, displaced persons, or DPs, as they used to call us. Displaced persons. We literally didn't have a country
or a government,
there was no country, and that was our passport. We have this in our possession.
We actually still have them
to this day. Yeah. And so we came to San Francisco, and so here's what happened. Some people came in from the Atlantic and they went to New York. Everybody else did. We had a 3-week horrendous trip across the Pacific on a ship with soldiers, bananas, and refugees.
There were just thousands of refugees on this ship. And of course they put us below deck. Okay, and the situation was there were rows and rows and rows of double bunk bed, triple bunk
beds.
beds. And everyone would sleep across the bed, however many people you could get on each bed. So that in itself was difficult. Also, we don't really remember how or what we ate.
We don't have any
But I'm sure
recollection.
they must have fed us probably bananas. I think.
We don't know we don't remember what we
remember
ate
eating
or
them,
how, or
yeah.
did we sit somewhere?
Yeah.
We never can remember.
But the kids did pretty well. However, most of the adults were seasick almost the whole trip. We had very bad weather, very strong
storms. It was
and-
very scary.
Yeah, it was quite scary. But the children played below deck wherever we could. Then one day, Monika and I got brave and we decided to go where we were not supposed to go, up a couple decks. And we opened the door and saw a long hallway with lots of doors on each side. And we just walked down. There was no one there. Everything was quiet. No one was there. And then we found a door that was partially open. So, of course, right, we had to peek. And we saw rows and rows of soldiers sitting in chairs. And they were laughing and smoking and drinking. And everyone was faced the same way, looking the same direction. So, of course, we opened the door a little bit more to see what they were looking at. And there on that wall, on the other side of the room, there on the wall, there were people dancing and singing
And there was music playing.
laughing, and there was a lot of music. We had no idea, not a clue what that was.
Because we had never heard of or seen a movie. And that's what it was.
We know, yeah.
We didn't even know what. We literally didn't know what we were looking at. You know, literally. Years later, we found out that was a Danny Kaye movie. I don't know. You guys are
Danny
young.
Kaye.
You probably don't know who Danny Kaye is. But he was a very famous singer,
musical.
dancer, a musical. It was a musical, but that was really thrilling, and we didn't get caught.
Nope. We were able to get back and
we
downstairs.
we got away with it. Yeah, that was very very exciting. So we're in San Francisco. They put us in a hotel, and we saw things we elevators, escalators, people drinking water directly out of faucets.
thing,
At,
yeah.
at first we were, no, you know, we were trained, never. And why? Because the water in China, in Shanghai, had some kind of bacteria in it that gave you an eye infection, which was not curable, and if you got it, you couldn't ever leave the country. So that was drilled into us from soon as they could communicate with children.
Yeah.
Children knew this, so you never drink water out of a faucet. But it was a fabulous experience, and we of course
food they gave
food
us, you
and
know,
we were in a
crab legs
hotel, and we had indoor plumbing, which we had never seen before.
Even seen before. Right. It was quite an adventure, and they were so kind and nice to us.
Yeah.
But then, you know, you have to do something with
All these people
all these people.
and at that time the United States really was very generous and let hundreds of thousands of Jewish refugees into the country. So 3 things had to happen in order for you to get moved out of either
be
side.
relocated.
3 things. 1, you had to have a place to live. No, not just an apartment or a house. It had to be fully furnished and have everything in it: linens, pots and pans, you know, things to eat with, clothes for the children, toys, clothes for everybody. Everything that makes up a house had to be there, because most of us came with a little suitcase, and maybe, like, we had $12 in American money
dad had
at that time. And that's how most of us arrived. And so that was number 1. You had to have a house, a place to live. Secondly, there had to be a job for the head of household, who probably didn't speak English. Third, there had to be a school that was willing to accept children who don't speak English. Whatever they speak, they don't speak, unlikely to speak English. Wherever those three things come together, that's where you go. So you couldn't, when they said, where do you want to go? You couldn't say, I want to live in Miami or Los Angeles or Chicago or whatever, just the country, not the city. And that's how we ended up in Duluth, Minnesota.
I don't know if you all know where that is, but it's just below Canada on Lake Superior.
Absolutely the coldest, one of the coldest places in the United States, with 9 months of winter and snow and blizzards. And,
but fortunately, we arrived in April.
Yeah, so it wasn't too bad.
It wasn't bad
yet.
Then. Yeah, we didn't find out. We didn't warm up for 3 years, we think, with the winter. I guess your blood has to
acclimate. Yeah, but anyway, that's where we were, and
we someone picked us up at the train station. We took a train from from San Francisco to Duluth, and that was about 3 days or more. Yeah, it took a little while. It was more. I remember now. And they brought us into an alley to the back of a building, two-story building, and said, this is where you will live upstairs.
It was really a two-story, like a duplex, downstairs, upstairs,
and
house.
They told the kids, go ahead, go
on up.
Run up
You're
the
going to
stairs.
live upstairs, they said.
Go ahead, I have to.
Okay, so we went up the stairs, and the first thing we saw was a great big metal box. And I mean, we had no idea what we were looking at, and you would not have an idea what you were looking at, because they don't have those anymore. But it was an ice box. And you open it up, there were these giant blocks of ice. Wow. There were no refrigerators then. We wouldn't have known what that was either. But, and people would deliver them with these giant hooks on their backs. They would deliver ice, these blocks of ice to you, and that's how you kept it. So we had one of those.
Yeah, in our case, the guy would have to come up the stairs.
Yeah, come up the stairs with a giant hook into the ice block.
Yeah. And then we... then we went into the door, and here was a wonderfully complete kitchen. Okay, with cabinets and dishes and
everything that you would
could
have
possibly want
in a kitchen, and like a stove and things like that. Something to cook on.
We hadn't seen either.
And right off the kitchen was a bathroom. An indoor bathroom, and next to that was a pantry, which was full of canned foods and boxed foods and all kinds of food. And we thought, wow, this is fantastic. We are moving into a palace. And then we find out that we have a dining room, a living room, two bedrooms, and oh my gosh, for our parents and one for us. But we spotted a little box like this on a table, little box like this, and somebody reached over and did something or another, and suddenly music came out of it. So we had another one of those experiences. We ran around to the back and said, where are
those people? How could those people
And of course, that was a radio, and we had never seen or heard of a radio. So we just kept having these kinds of, people now, you grow up with all these things. Nothing is magic anymore because you're used to it. But for us, there's so much magic in that experience. To this day, we don't know how radios work.
Yeah.
Never figured.
Never figured it out.
Never figured
But
it
there
out.
were toys and there were clothes and, you know, just
They were all
everything.
hand-me-downs, but
But-
it was a lot. We didn't know people had more than one pair of shoes,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
instance, at a time.
Yeah.
You know.
And they sent us out to the backyard, which was fenced in, and there were lilac bushes all along the fence. It was
Wonderful
just
fragrance.
A wonderful, wonderful thing. We had never seen anything like it. So
So the down part of all this for us was that 2 years after our mother disappeared, and evidently there was a divorce, our dad met and married another Jewish, German Jewish refugee who had a daughter 1 year younger than we were from her previous marriage. And honestly, this was the stepmother from hell. And just created a terrible next 10 years for us. She couldn't stand us. She just didn't want to have anything to do with us. She didn't like us. She did what she had to care for us, but we were just not her favorite people. We don't understand why. We were so cute and we did well in school and
we never gave anybody any trouble.
never did anything wrong. But anyway, bottom line, she physically and emotionally abused us for the next 10 years until we were 17. In many ways, this part of our life was more difficult than what we experienced in the ghetto because we were a little older and we knew what was going on.
Yeah.
We were 7 when she came into our life, and it did not end till we left home at 17.
And what was your relationship like with her daughter?
Just as bad.
Yeah, we had nothing in common.
Yeah.
We were very bright, active kids, and she wasn't. Let's put it that way. And but her mother insisted that whatever we did, she had to do with us. And so we have a lot of pictures with her in between us, and when we did try to participate in school activities like singing, she had to sing with us and she couldn't sing,
Yeah.
you know, stuff like that. So, but anyway, that's what happened. And then that was the down thing, because that continued to be our life. However, once we were out of our door, you know, our home, people liked us, the teachers loved us, the other kids, we were happy.
Yeah, we were
The minute we left home, we were like these different people, and so that was our salvation. Is that we had a lot of support from neighbors, from teachers, you know, from other adults and other kids. And besides that, we had each other. We think that this is what enabled us to go on.
To get through, yeah. And unfortunately, our dad couldn't find it in himself to protect us. And
I mean, frankly, he was a real nebbish person, you know. He was just not there. He was, and that's the way we knew him all those years till the day he died. That's just the way it was. And we did talk to him. I think we were about 15, and we said, you know what, you really need to get away from this woman. We all do. And he said something that was very important, which was, yeah, well, in 2 years or 3 years, you'll be gone and I'll be alone. And that's what it was all about. Yeah. Anyway, about a half a century later, we got a chance to go back to the ghetto. And the first time we were there, it was just like it was when we left.
Exactly the same.
Exactly the same.
road down the middle.
Yeah, I mean
And
everything.
the alleys with the living.
And the first door on this side of this picture was our room where we lived. This is the exact room where we lived.
Yeah.
And so you kind of get an idea, you know, how it was and how narrow, you know, how narrow the alleys were. Look at that.
Yeah, there we are. My husband and I knocked on the door, and we had a little Chinese English dictionary, right? And someone came to the door, and I had our exit paper, which showed this address. Okay, on it, that's where we lived. And so we tried to explain, I used to live here when I was a child, and we're just visiting, but it was no good. And as we were there, all these people started coming out of the other dwellings there. And finally someone sent for the English teacher, who lived a little bit away, and she's the one in the white dress, a young lady. And then it was, oh, you know, then they understood, and they were so happy and wanted, you know, to talk to us as best we could. And there was a man.
It's the gentleman in the back was kind
Very
of
back.
balding. Yeah, him.
And he said he remembers the foreign twins because his family moved into our place when
we left.
That was really something. And then he said he remembers people with names like
Rosenberg, you know,
Finkelstein,
you know, and he rattled off a whole bunch of Jewish names. And so he was actually.
Yeah, it was really something. It was an amazing thing to experience.
Yeah, and then my husband and I went about two years later and had the same experience but we brought a Polaroid with us and took a picture of someone and handed her the, you know, and I don't know if you know Polaroid, there's nothing on there, and she gave it back, and we're saying, you know, and then they all went back in their houses and came out with their children all dressed up, and then we were taking pictures, you know, the rest of the time.
Yeah.
We also
Look, guess who this is?
remember Sonia and her brother Peter. Well, we got together in 2015, and we had a day together in Germany. We were on a cruise, and they stopped at Regensburg. Everybody went to Jerusalem or someplace else, and we stayed there, and Sonia and her brother came from Berlin, and we tried to recreate the picture, as you see. And of course we had to help Peter up.
Yeah.
But we had an amazing day together, and there was a film company sent a crew from Hong Kong. They were very interested in the whole story, and they followed us around all day, interviewed us, and just kept filming, and we had a chance to, you know, share memories, and it was just a remarkable. And we're like I say, we're still in. Anyway, this is what's left of the ghetto. This is down below is the synagogue, up above is the museum, and on this side of the museum is a wall, kind of like our Vietnam wall here, with the names of the refugees. So far, I think they've gathered somewhere in 15,000 or so. Sonia's responsible for many, many thousands of them. And it's a beautiful museum, and we've left some things with them when we were there to see it. And so if you ever go to Shanghai, you really should see that museum. They've done a beautiful job. When we were maybe 24, 25, somewhere in there,
like that.
we decided to look for her. Didn't know anything about her, didn't know if she was dead or alive or living next door, or, you know, had no real memory of her and had almost no information. I had met someone who said, why don't you go to the Council of Jewish Women here in Los Angeles, because they have an office for the foreign-born. That's what it was called.
Yeah.
And so off we went, and I went down. They said, oh yeah, it's down the last office down the hall. And in there was a tiny office, it was almost like a closet, and there was this wonderful woman there who I don't like to stereotype or generalize, but honest to God, she was the epitome of a New York Jewish older woman, complete with the dialect and the whole thing. She was, so they come out, oh, you want to find your mother? We'll help you. And comes out with this huge document, and we knew 5 pieces of information. We knew her name, we knew
Where
her
she
maid,
was born,
where
yeah.
she was born. Her maiden name was on our birth certificate, that she had married our dad, that she lived in Shanghai, as far as we knew, from 1938, and that was it. That's what we knew. And she said, okay. And I don't know, it was 5 years later.
Yeah, about 5 years later.
5 years later,
Yeah.
I got a call one morning, and here's this voice. Don't get excited, but we think we found your mother. You know, 5 years later. And then she talked about, you know, if you do get in touch with her, because they were all also in touch with her, to let her know. Be sure and come up with something that only she could possibly know, because sometimes people try to get to the States for, you know, that story.
Yeah, but she practically the same day
It was the same, no, the same
was
day.
the
It was
same
that afternoon that we had a
got a
letter
letter
from
from
her with a picture of
Yeah.
her. She included a picture, and there was, you know, not really
not
any.
too many questions about whether she was our mother.
Yeah.
But it turns out that she also married in 1947 at the same time that our dad got married. She married another refugee, Horst, who had spent 4.5 years in Dachau, right outside of Munich, and they had a baby, 7 years younger than we were, Dorothy. Okay, so.
So yeah, here's the interesting thing, and it's an important piece of, about refugees, Jewish refugees, and the Holocaust. When she was contacted from whoever they did whatever was going on all these 5 years, when she was contacted, she got a letter saying that her daughters were looking for her, and she ran down the hall to Dorothy's room, our half-sister,
It was about 19 or
20, something like that at the time. And she said, my girls are looking for me. And she said, what girls?
She had never told her one word about us, nor Dorothy's dad didn't ever.
He knew, he was there, and so did a lot of other people. All those years, the refugees many of them knew each other. They knew each other from Shanghai, they knew each other from Germany, and then they knew each other from Minnesota, because lots of people landed in the Midwest, because that's where the generous people really were and gave you a home and everything. And you know, we went to people who we knew were in Shanghai, and we said, what happened? You were there, we were kids, you know. We even ran into a woman who was not only in Shanghai, but in the same room of 5 families with us. She was living in Florida.
She was a little older, maybe.
Well, 5 years old. She was 10
older, yeah.
when our mother left. She was 10. We were 5.
And she said, she was.
I said, well, you must have heard something.
Yes, yeah.
You know. Yeah. She said, well, our dad to talk about it, that your dad started drinking, and it was just an impossible
What
story.
seemed like a crazy story to
But
us.
maybe, I think the
Yeah.
war did unimaginable things to people.
But she said that our mother was the talk of the camp. So
Something happened. Our fantasy, the one we like, the story we have made up for ourselves that we like, is that she and Horst met and they fell in love. And he was a wonderful man. We loved him.
Yeah.
And they were in our lives for their last 20 years. They didn't live here, but she was found in Israel.
Where
And
in
that's,
Israel did she live?
hmm?
Where in Israel did she live?
Ramat Gan. Yeah.
Well, no, at first they went to Svat.
Well, first
Yeah.
they went to Svat.
They
Yeah,
lived in
that's
Svat,
right.
yeah.
But then-
And eventually they landed in Ramat Gan.
Yeah.
And Dorothy, our
Dorothy.
half-sister, still lives there.
lives there. We're in touch with her all the time. We
Yeah.
visited. She and her husband have visited in the States.
So our mom, unfortunately, had this horrendous life of giving us up, of losing everybody. In fact, both of them lost everybody else. They were the survivors. Yeah. And so one of the things that I think is kind of fun to talk about is that we didn't know what to call her. You know, we brought her here when we got in touch. We brought her here and we talked about it because we were almost 30 and we were 5 the last time we saw her, you know. And so we together decided that we would call her Ima, which, as you know, is Hebrew for mother, but nobody knew that. All our friends called her Ima and
They
thought it was her name, you know. But we have this one picture, and the only picture we have of the 5 of us together. And we were 44 when we met Dorothy, who's in the middle, and Ima and Horst. Ima, unfortunately, suffered. She had early stage Alzheimer's already. She PTSD, she had guilt, anxiety.
Lone survivor
Lone,
syndrome.
you know, the
her
fir-
entire family died in
And we heard
terrible
the
stories.
5 or 6 different versions of why she left from her.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's just a picture of them. And here we are, Israel in 2013. We went for Dorothy's son's wedding, and this is our Israel family.
We were there just
22. We were there in 22. Yeah, and just before everything shut down, or right
I'm not
after.
in the picture because I
Because
took
she's
the picture.
taking the picture. Anyway, I know we have to go, but we'd like to say this. We live a life of gratitude. We are so grateful for what the opportunities we had in this country. We both had fabulous careers. Gitta has rebuilt our family. She has 5 kids, 12 grandchildren, 6 great-grandchildren, and so we have huge family gathering. I said, she's done enough. I'm going to school. I ended up with a PhD and a great career in gerontology and social work and teaching at USC, and we've just done so well. Somewhere along the line we discovered music, and we both picked up instruments in our middle 30s, and we go to festivals, our jams, we play whenever we possibly can. We both have had 45 plus years of marriage. My husband unfortunately passed away last year, but they're still at it. You're about year 46 or 7, I guess now.
Actually, year 48. is
We
coming.
really have had wonderful adult lives, So- and we're very, very grateful.
Grateful. We're
Grateful.
happy.
We're happy. I think we've done. We not only survived, we thrived. And that's kind of the message, that you can do it. We have been in a position to forgive as much as we can. Our stepmother realizing what the war must have done to the adults of that time. And we've gone on with our lives, and that's our story.
And thank you for
Thank you for
caring
your
about it
interest
and
and-
wanting to hear about it.